you ever wondered what is hypnosis and what is the science behind it? Well, listen on. My name is Sinew, but you can call me Sin, spelt with an X, not an S. I'm a neuroscience PhD student and a doctor training to be a neurologist here at the University of Oxford, and I will discuss all things brain related. Welcome to my review series of Oxford Academic Talks, where I give my thoughts and discuss some of the many fascinating academic events that happen here at the University of Oxford in a way that is accessible to everybody, whether you're a researcher or just plain interested. Find out more about this series in my introduction video. I attended a fascinating evening of talks last week entitled The Mystery of Hypnosis. This was hosted by the Center for the Creative Brain, and it was held entirely on Microsoft Teams, of course, due to the pandemic, but it was well run and an interesting evening. I will discuss content from the last two speakers of the evening, which was a discussion on the practical side of hypnosis from a Mr. Jack Blackbourn, who is a magician and a professional hypnotist, and Dr. Devine Terhune from Goldsmith University, who does his research into the cognitive phenomena of hypnotism. Now I'm going to start off with my three main takeaways from these talks. Number one, hypnosis is not some mystical art where a person is placed into some magical trance to perform unthinkable or inhuman acts. Rather, it can be considered as a state of suggestibility. More on this to come. Number two, practically speaking, the act of performing hypnosis can be learned and was described as being easier than learning sleight of hand. And thirdly, there's been a vast amount of research into hypnosis from studying the brain waves and performing functional imaging of the brain, and I think that's really cool. Now, I won't be able to go in depth in all the science that was discussed, but I will try to hit the main things that caught my eye, and I'm very happy to continue the conversation in the discussion below. Let's discuss Mr. Jack Blackbourn first, the magician and professional hypnotist. Now, he didn't tell us how hypnotism works per se, but he discussed what it was like to carry it out. He also told us that anyone can learn hypnotism and that he learned it mainly from books and watching videos. Now, a lot of hypnotism is about conversational psychology from what I gathered. His examples mainly consisted of starting a conversation with a person and by the end of it, persuading that person to do something that they didn't think they would have done at the beginning of the conversation. He gave an example of the underlying psychology with a simple exercise, and why don't we do that together? So I want you to think of four things. Firstly, a number between 1 and 10, a vegetable, a shape, a simple shape, not like a star, and a romantic city. Okay? Have you thought of those things? Keep it in your mind. Well, apparently, he says that more than a third of people will pick either the number 3 or 7, a carrot, a triangle, and the city of Paris. I have to admit, my picks were the number 8, aubergine, square, and the city of Florence, but perhaps I'm just an outlier. He also described how the way you phrase a question is very important. For example, if you say pick a number between 1 and 10, people are apparently unlikely to pick either the number 1 or 10, which narrows the possibilities down by 20% already. Now, Jack spoke about many other interesting things, but let's move on to the next speaker who talked more about the science underlying hypnotism. So Dr. Devine Terhune gave an interesting and a great introduction to what hypnotism is from the scientific perspective. And as I mentioned before, it is not some mystic art, and he describes it as being much maligned in popular media into something mysterious. But in fact, he described hypnotism as a state of suggestibility. The level of suggestibility will vary between individuals. So if you take a population of people, a group of people, and in this group of individuals, there will be some who are highly suggestible and some who score low on a suggestibility scale. In fact, many of the scientific research studies into hypnotism tend to compare the difference between these two groups. A fascinating point he made during the Q&A was that it's actually quite difficult to shift people along this scale of suggestibility and make a highly suggestible person have low suggestibility. There are some drugs, such as psychedelics, which can do this, but generally you're fairly stuck at your level of suggestibility. Now, I think this has interesting implications on the whole nature versus nurture argument. He He went on to discuss how being suggestible may not necessarily be a bad thing, as highly suggestible people may in fact be more sociable. And research looking into the mechanisms of suggestibility have examined people on things like imagination, cognitive control, and expectation. Now, when looking into which part of the brain may be sort of responsible for suggestibility, it is not a surprise that research have found that the prefrontal part of the brain is different between highly suggestible individuals and people who are not. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain which sits right in the front, hence the name prefrontal, and it is important for a range of cognitive functions, including complex motor planning, social interaction, and decision making. One study that he described suggested that the connectivity from the prefrontal part of our brain to other parts is actually reduced in people who are highly suggestible, which I take it as reflecting less cognitive control to suggestions, but that hasn't quite been proven. Now, a final point that I will discuss is the clinical aspect of suggestibility. The one example is something that doctors see all the time called the placebo effect, and this is when individuals feel that they are getting a benefit from a medication when they're actually being given a placebo pill or a sugar pill. And the opposite also holds true, and that's called the nocebo effect. And this is when individuals feel like they're experiencing a bad side effect from taking a sugar pill or a placebo pill. Now, I thought this was an interesting approach to framing suggestibility, which in my mind seems quite unrelated to the original topic of hypnosis. However, if you think about it, those two are actually related. Now, I'm going to finish there for this video, and I apologize for not going through all the other fascinating things that were discussed, which include common traits in suggestible people, how to pick suggestible people out of a crowd, looking at EEG studies where they measure brain waves in suggestible people, and also linking suggestibility with psychopathology, the risk of psychiatric conditions. I'm very happy to continue this conversation down below in the comments. And why don't you tell me, do you believe in hypnotism? And do you think you would be an easy person to hypnotize or a highly suggestible person? Thank you very much, and subscribe to learn more about neuroscience with me, and I'll catch you at the next video.